Okay, today I'm joined by Russ Avery, who is the founder and chief executive officer of Avery and Brown, a branding and marketing company specializing in supporting purpose-driven businesses. So thank you for joining us, Russ.
Pleasure to be here, Gareth. Thanks for having me.
So can we start at the beginning of your story and perhaps you could tell us how you got started in sustainability?
Yeah, absolutely. How long have you got? So, so I actually graduated with a degree in languages. I did French and Russian at the University of Exeter, and I graduated in 2007 and had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do for a career. I did temp jobs in London for 2 years before I sort of took a step back and thought, right, I've really got to think about what I actually want to do long term here. Um, and I just kept coming back to wanting to get a job in something to do with sort of nature, wildlife, the environment, because that's something I've always been incredibly passionate about, even though I didn't have the academic qualifications to prove that. So I did something about it and went back to university. So I started doing a degree in natural and environmental sciences with the Open University, which was great because it meant I could do a sort of semi-intensive distance learning course while I was still working. And while I was doing that, I started applying for jobs. And I managed to get my foot in the door with a small ocean conservation charity called SeaWeb, which was an American charity that had a small London office. And I got the job, which was great. So that was my foot in the door, and that was really great. I worked at SeaWeb for 2 years, doing various things from kind of like general admin for two of the vice presidents when I started, but then falling into the world of writing blog posts and managing social media, which is
Mhm.
how I sort of discovered that I liked marketing. And then everything started coming together because I was using my language skills to write. So although I wasn't using any French or Russian, at least I was using my sort of broader language and communication skills to write content and communicate C-Web's messages in an engaging way. So that's how I got started in sustainability, and that was back in 2010.
So how did your career advance from there?
Yeah. So after 2 years at CWeb, my wife and I moved out of central London when we were expecting our first baby. We moved to Farnham in Surrey, which is where we still are today. And we've now got three. And when I moved here, the stars really kind of aligned because I started applying for new jobs so that I didn't have to do the commute. And I got a job as the marketing and communications manager for a startup sustainability consultancy, which at the time was called Carbon Credentials. And that was an amazing journey. I joined the company when we were 5 people in an office in Farnham. And by the time I left 4 years later, we were 55, 60 people on Regent Street in central London. So
Mhm.
that journey from sort of experiencing 5 to 55 and being the marketing and communications manager there was absolutely amazing. And that's where I really cut my teeth as a marketer within sustainability, especially in the B2B business space, which I'll come on to in a bit because that's very much still the area in which Avery and Brown operates today. Um, After Carbon Credentials, which by the way became Carbon Intelligence and then sold to Accenture about 18 months, 2 years ago. So pretty incredible 10-year journey they had. After Carbon Credentials, I moved to another company called Sustainable Commercial Solutions, which was another corporate sustainability consultancy. And I rebranded that company into Evora Global under a big kind of strategic rebranding project. And I was there for 2 years, witnessing incredible growth from about, I don't know, 12 to 35, 40 people.
Mhm.
But I was still commuting into London 4 days a week.
Yes.
Uh, so yeah, in 2018, called time on Evora Global and decided to go it alone as a independent marketing consultant for sustainable brands.
Yes.
And yeah, and I was doing that for I was only doing that for a year actually before I met Tim, my business partner, the Brown in Avery and Brown. And then Tim, the journey there is that Tim was a graphic designer working for an agency at the time. Met him in January 2019. He had already been thinking about his kind of next step and going solo anyway. He actually then left his agency to become a freelance graphic designer and digital creative. But and then we started working together. I started using Tim's graphic design and digital creative services for my Russ Avery consulting clients. And the quick version of the story is that we really enjoyed working together, decided to merge our respective businesses to grow something bigger than just kind of the lifestyle businesses that we had. And that's how Avery and Brown was born. And that was in August 2020 in COVID.
My company was born of a hatred of commuting too. Wanted to get out of that particular thing. I think it's probably a theme. So, so what do you specialize in doing now with the company?
Yep. So we are sustainability first and foremost. So, you know, although Tim wasn't from a sustainability background, he was happy with, you know, getting on board with that. And it was obviously, I wasn't going to budge on that. So we weren't just going to be a marketing agency for anyone. It had to be continuing the focus of working with purpose-driven, sustainability-focused clients that I already was as Russ Avery Consulting Limited and from my previous career. So that was all good. And that was, you know, from day one. And we provide a broad range of brand strategy and branding, marketing, creative and communications services. So a really broad spectrum of stuff. There's actually very few things from the kind of big marketing remit that we don't do as an agency. And our niche is B2B. So we don't really work with B2C FMCG brands. We really love the B2B sector, partly because it's really exciting to help grow those brands that sort of tend to think in quite an old-fashioned way about the fact that because they're business to business, they can't be fun or engaging or communicate creatively. And of course, that's nonsense. So there's often a really exciting opportunity in working with these brands and being able to take them from like bland and boring, quite frankly, a lot of the time, to sort of exciting and engaging and, you know, communicating their sustainability credentials and journey in a much more engaging way.
So how do you define, or have you defined, purpose driven?
Yeah, so we're doing a lot of work on this at the moment because we're actually doing our theory of change at the moment, which I can talk about a bit later maybe. But it's been up to now, it's been very quite gut feel based on sort of discovery calls we have with clients and, you know, doing some research, like looking at their websites, seeing what they're all about, and then talking to, well, it's often the founder, MD, CEOs that we're talking to with these clients. So yeah, having worked in the space for almost 15 years, I generally get a really good feeling from those discovery calls, whether they're the real deal and mean it or not. However, we have realized that will only get us so far now that we're growing. And, you know, we've got a salesperson on the team now who doesn't have that experience. So we're actually thinking about what that actually means on paper in terms of some specific criteria. In about 2 months' time, or by the end of the summer, hopefully we'll have a much better idea of what that looks like, and we'll be asking more specific questions about their kind of net zero goals and things like that.
Yeah, fantastic. You know, you said that a lot of these B2B companies tend to be a bit dull in how they market themselves. But I was just wondering, in a broader sense, what would you say that your potential clients typically get wrong in how they brand and market themselves, apart from being dull? Or maybe you could expand on them being dull if you like as well.
Yeah, sure. So honestly, the majority of them have never focused on their brand strategy properly before. So they've never actually sat down strategically with external support, because that's what's needed. Because a lot of these brands, what you have to remember is that because of the nature of the work that they do, a lot of the sort of founder MDs that we work with are engineers by background.
Mhm.
And engineers typically do not understand marketing and the more creative side of things. I can see you smirking, Gareth.
I don't think I've got my degree thing behind me, but yes, I am an
So,
engineer.
and every business has got to start somewhere, right? We're not blaming these companies at all. They've got to start somewhere, get their business started, and that means they've had little to zero budget to do, to bring in an external agency to help them with their brand strategy and stuff. So we find out that lots of them have never really focused on that, and that's really exciting for us because it means that we get to sit down with them and help them establish their purpose, vision, mission, values, positioning statement, value proposition, etc., and their visual identity, of course, which sometimes the founder even did that themselves. No word of a lie, we rebranded a quite large energy software tech company whose logo the founder had designed himself using Microsoft PowerPoint. So
Right.
so things like that, you'd be surprised how often it comes along. So we've worked on some really exciting projects, and yeah, it's they just tend to look a bit dull, a bit bland, and it's either because that's kind of how they think they should look based on being whatever they are, some sort of renewable energy tech company or software company operating in sustainability, or it's because the founder did it all themselves, sort of 3 to 5 years ago, sometimes even longer, and they just haven't updated it since. And then we are able to go in there and really elevate that business to the next level from a branding and marketing perspective.
Yeah, because one of the things that's interesting, running a company in this space is that uh, most tend to fall back on the sort of eco cliches. We always get these pictures of hands cupping a sapling, which is a particular love to
Yeah,
hate of mine. I
yeah, we hate
absolutely, I
that.
detest it so much that I actually like it in a way. Or hands cupping the earth, all these sorts of
Oh yeah,
cliches. But I suppose the problem is if you don't have a bit of that, then people may not get that purpose-driven element, what you're about as a company.
yeah.
So, have you got any insights into how to square that circle?
Yeah, sure. So we don't find that at all, basically, which is good. So if you have to use pictures of saplings growing through earth coming out of your hands,
Yeah.
then it's because you're not good with words, basically. So you're unable to communicate your purpose effectively with words and language. So you're having to fall back on using images like that, which are, I agree, just like awful. I never want to see that photo again, but sadly, it still crops up every now and again on websites that we look at. So yeah, that's where your story comes into it, and that's exactly what we do. So helping to craft really engaging sustainability purpose-driven narratives for these companies so that they can have a logo that is appropriate to their sector and their target audience who they're trying to attract, and that absolutely does not need to be green and blue just because they operate in some area of sustainability. So yeah.
So, I don't know whether or not you can share with us because you talked about the example before of the company who had created their own logo, which once upon a time I did. My current logo isn't mine, but once when I was getting started, it was. But do you have a favorite campaign that you can share?
um that's a great question. Nothing that immediately springs to my head.
I
I
should have
mean,
warmed you up in that one, but
yeah.
something you use as a testimonial or something like that that's already in the public domain.
Yeah, so trying to think of the case studies on our website. I mean, I love the work we've done with Mesh Energy over the last 4 years now, because they were actually our very first client that we won as Russ and Tim before we officially became Avery and Brown. So there's a nice 4 year journey there, and yeah, that was a good story of sort of parachuting in and fixing some to be honest, shit work that another marketing agency had done that the founder was using for us, who had no sustainability background. They were just a sort of local high street marketing agency here in Farnham, and they'd built them a suboptimal website. The brand wasn't established sort of beyond just the logo and the color palette. There was no sort of substance and depth behind it. So we came in, to Mesh Energy in 2020, helped them with their brand strategy. We did a brand refresh for them, not a full visual rebrand. So we sort of touched up the logo, refined the color palette, and then established a sort of wider visual identity to accompany that. Built them a new website, which was much more optimized for content and discoverability and lead generation as well. And sort of all the arrows sort of kept going in the right direction, which you'd expect, because people don't retain you for 4 years if they're not seeing the results. So that's a really good case study. So yeah, I'm really proud of the work that we've done for Mesh Energy. And, in the last 4 years, they've gone from sort of 8 people to over 20, and they've got a really inspiring growth journey. And they've switched from being sort of predominantly doing lower end residential projects to higher end commercial projects that they always wanted to do. And in many ways, they're really sort of only just getting started. And yeah, there's an exciting road ahead.
Yeah. And then obviously this area has various pitfalls, including greenwashing and greenhushing and various other phrases, terms like that. How do you make sure you keep clear of greenwash in particular?
It's very easy, actually. So the team are all carbon literate. So that massively helps. And we understand the green claims code, and we know how to completely avoid saying things that would be at risk of greenwashing. And it's all about asking the right questions. So if a client sends us something for us to read, or they send us something that they want to publish, the team know how to check whatever that is for any risks of greenwash based on what they're saying, in terms of claims not being backed up and justified by the correct data. And this is the difference in us as an agency and other agencies which aren't sort of sustainable marketing agencies. Green hushing is happening increasingly now because companies either don't have the internal marketing resource and knowledge on knowing how to communicate their sustainability journey correctly, accurately and effectively, or their existing marketing and comms agency, who they are otherwise quite happy with, are also not sustainability specialists, so they don't know how to do it either. And so the lack of knowledge and resource leads to green hushing, whereby companies that might be doing some really good stuff then don't communicate what they're doing for fear of not knowing how to communicate it accurately, for fear of greenwashing. So it's an interesting thing that we're seeing going on at the moment.
But have you ever had to push back on a client who says, look, our product or service is this fantastic green breakthrough product or service, but have you ever had to push back and go, no, actually it's not that great on the grand scale of things?
A couple of times we've had to change the wording, because it can be such a fine line between what you're saying. A couple of times we've had to adjust the wording for some services, which is obviously our world being B2B. It's all it's predominantly service based, not product based. But there's been no major red flag that was avoided. And I think the reason for that is because of the B2B services world we operate in. There's not as much greenwash typically going on there as there is in the B2C product world. But there was there's one at the moment who we are needing to tell they have to be very careful about something they're saying, because
Yeah.
it's like it's happened through a sort of loophole, shall we say?
Yeah.
And we're going to tell them to be much more cautious about that. But that's pretty much all I can say about that one.
Yeah, but it's just over the years I've seen many PR departments, rather not marketing companies, but PR departments, sort of trying to put that level of gloss on things all the time, because that's what they do. You know, they're not going to say, "Oh, our product is the seventh best in the market." They're going to find a way of trying to say it's the best, and but they don't. Those people don't seem to realize, obviously, when it comes to green claims, that you can't do that in the same way. You know, we've seen these big examples where the Advertising Standards Agency have knocked back adverts from lots of big brands for not putting their claims in proper context, which is, you know, I think one of the most prevalent forms of greenwash at the minute is, you know, they'll say, "Oh, we've saved enough, you know, carbon to fill the Albert Hall," and nobody knows whether that's a lot or a little, but it sounds like a lot. So I don't know whether that comes in, given that it's, as you say, B2B, whether it's a little bit less likely that people will trumpet themselves to that degree.
Yeah. I mean, when you said that, it reminds me of a just a really important point about communicating anything to do with large numbers about sort of carbon saved or
Yeah.
emissions avoided or whatever. Um, Always, it's just so intangible. Often, you've got to put it into terms that are much more real and that people can understand. So if you can use a human element there somehow, then people will instantly be able to relate to it. So big figures really are not helpful. Even when you say uh, X thousands of tons of CO2, and then if you say enough to fill the Albert Hall, still can't really visualize that. People have got to get better at finding a way of communicating that benefit and what that actually equates to in real terms, so that you're making your message much more effective, engaging, and understandable. So that's something we really enjoy doing when we're helping clients with impact reports, for example. Is how do you bring that data to life in a way that people actually get it?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Uh, you're a B Corp. Uh,
That's right. Yeah.
yeah. How did that come about, or was that part of demonstrating that authenticity on your own part?
So B Corp was on our radar from day one.
Mm.
So it was something we had always aspired to. And yeah, because of our sort of purpose-driven, sustainable focus since the day the business was founded, I think I've known about B Corp. I don't know when exactly, but I think I've known about them since at least 2016.
Mm.
When I was still at Carbon Credentials. So it's always been on my sort of radar and my wish list to sort of, yeah, establish and run a B Corp one day. So it was on our radar from the beginning. You then have to be at least a year old as a business to become a B Corp. So that took us to 2021, and that's when we started. 21, 22 is when we started the work on the very long process that you have to go through
Yeah.
to become one, which we can chat a bit more about if you think your listeners might want to hear a bit about that. And then yeah, we submitted our the impact assessment, and you then get put in a quite a long queue, which is good, I guess, because it's based on how many companies are now going through the process. And we finally certified in August 2023, actually
Yeah.
on the last day of our third year in business, which was really
Yeah.
nice.
So is that, obviously, that's quite a burden to submit, like any accreditation, but presumably you feel it's worth it. You know, if you set off in that direction from the start.
Well, I'll be really honest, Gareth. Is it worth it for us as a business and the way we operate? Yes, absolutely, because we've now got a framework for improvement across those all important ESG criteria. Has it been worth it after almost a year in terms of business development and sort of attracting new clients? Not yet.
Yeah.
We've been asked by one prospect so far to complete a new supplier form that was all
Mm.
about your sustainability credentials and your business ethics and stuff.
Mm.
Uh, and that was really refreshing to be sent that, because I completed this form knowing that we were coming out
Mm.
top, because I could answer yes to nearly every question that they asked, I think, or maybe every
Yeah.
question, because there were questions about your business accreditations, of which B Corp was the top one. Various other things like, are you a living wage employer? Yes, we are. Do you only, do you say no to certain sectors and only work with purpose-driven businesses? Yes, we do. God, what else was on there? Oh, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. We've had those independently calculated and verified every year. Every
Mm.
year we've been in business so far, including this most recent year, the full whack, including our purchase goods and services within scope 3. So that was really refreshing, because I completed something that a new prospect had asked for, knowing that
Yeah.
we were scoring very high other agencies that would be going for that work. But have we noticed a direct link to sort of winning new clients and business growth off the back of it yet? No. But I guess it's still quite early days, and we'll have only been a B Corp for 1 year at the end of August this year. So I guess time will tell.
You mentioned before your framework for change or theory of change. Was it?
Theory of change,
Is
yeah.
it? Yeah. Do you want to expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say too much about it because we are literally going through the process now. But I can say that it's been fantastic, and I wish we'd done it sooner, but it's simply because I didn't really know much about it or how to get started on it. So a theory of change typically or historically came from the charitable sector. So it's
Hmm.
something charities did a lot, but not a lot of businesses have done. And we got introduced to this great guy called Anton, who is helping us go through it. And basically, it's really about getting down to the root of your why and your purpose and your impact,
Hmm.
uh, and what it actually means across multiple different sort of verticals. And we had a great workshop the week before last, and it's the kind of thing where the whiteboard was covered in a gigantic spider diagram of all the different areas of the business and what impact and purpose really means, both through our operations, from what we do as a business and as a marketing agency, through the impact we have on our clients. And that's the one that we hadn't really focused on that much before. So
Hmm.
thinking about the positive impact we have as a result of the work we do for those clients through the marketing services we have provided for them. And that's where things get really interesting. And then, yeah, various other things like the easy part is the direct impact you make through things like your charitable giving, donations you make, the work you do for the way you treat your employees and stuff like that. That's the
Hmm.
easy bit. But we've gone really deep on thinking about that impact at a deeper level through the work we do for our clients and what that means. And at the end of it, we will, hopefully a few weeks' time, we will have something on paper that the whole team can look at that
Hmm.
constantly reminds us of what we're doing and the impact that we're making, who we're trying to go after. Because at the end of the day, it is a theory. So you write it aspirationally based on what you want to be doing.
Hmm.
And we will be able to recreate this in a really nice visual diagram, thanks to the help of the internal creative abilities that we've obviously got as
Hmm.
Avery and Brown. And yeah, we'll turn it into a beautiful poster for the office wall that will constantly remind us of why we're doing what we're doing and the type of clients that we're going after and the impact that we can have. So I'd definitely recommend people look into theory of change and what it can do. But when we've finished it, we'll try and write a blog post or and or do a video and a podcast episode about it so that others can sort of hear about that journey.
But a bit like the B Corp, it seems to be again grounding you in that purpose-driven space rather than, it's always a little bit easy. And as an independent consultant, I know this. Somebody will offer you a piece of work, and you think, well, that's not quite what I set out to do. Should I do it? So, but it sounds as if it keeps you grounded in that space.
Yeah, 100%. That's a great way of putting it. That's exactly what it's there for. It really grounds you and cements you and helps you articulate your impact better. So when we've got our theory of change completed, it will be a major focus of our impact report next year. Mm-hmm. Well, one for this year, 2024, that will be published next year. Yeah.
Excellent. When I was going through your LinkedIn profile beforehand, which is the extent of the research I do in these interviews, I noticed that you say you had an interest in AI for good. So yeah. A lot of the talk about AI is sort of apocalyptic Terminator style machines taking over the universe. So perhaps you could explain the upside of AI as you see it.
Sure. So the background there is very simply that I wanted to learn more about AI, where it's headed, its implications, both as a business owner and what it means for us at Avery Brown, and also a personal interest through, as you mentioned, the link between AI for good, so AI for sustainability purposes, and its role in the creation of a better world. So to do something about that, I took the Oxford AI course, which I can highly recommend. And I'm not affiliated with them, and they're not paying me to say that. So it really was good. It was intensive. I'm like a lot of people, really busy running a small business, and I've got a small family at home. So it was really intensive. So it took up my entire Sundays for a 6-week period. So it's quite exhausting, but it was also very, very good, and really detailed. So I learned all about how AI actually works. So the first 3 weeks were very technical, and they were actually more difficult than the second 3 weeks. But it was really good because to understand something properly, you have to understand how it works in the first place, right? So that gave us all a good knowledge of how our large language models, etc., actually work, and all about data. And then the second 3 weeks were about the ethics of AI. Again, really interesting in our world in ethics and sustainability. So that was a really good module. And then, about the specific use cases and implications for businesses of different sizes. And of course, marketing is perhaps the sector that's being most affected by AI already. Mm-hmm. Because obviously now everyone thinks that they can create epic content with ChatGPT and create amazing images with Midjourney. And of course, to a certain extent, that is true. If you know how to write the right prompts, then you can get much better outputs from it. So like talking about, barriers to entry of like marketing, like going right down, and then AI comes along, and people are sort of producing content with ChatGPT and stuff. It's an interesting new world that we're going into. So I'm making sure that I'm staying at the cutting edge of what's happening here, so that I know how Avery Brown could and should be adapting. But that's a very long answer to answer your question about AI.
No, not at all.
But I just wanted to give you the background there.
I've only dipped a toe in this, and I suppose my criticism of AI is it tends to give a rather beige result, which is probably inevitable because you're feeding in lots and lots of stuff. You're going to get the center of the bell curve, and
so it's getting better. Mm-hmm. But as I mentioned, when you work out that you can actually prompt it in an incredibly detailed way, mm-hmm. Some people will, when ChatGPT first came around, you would type in something like, write me a blog post about renewable energy. Mm-hmm. It's going to produce something incredibly generic. Mm-hmm. Like now, and as the modules are getting better every few months or so, you can write a much longer, more detailed prompt that could be 1,000-word prompt if you wanted to, about what specifically you wanted it to help you write a blog post about,
Mm.
what style and tone it should take. You can, give it detailed prompts about the subheaders, like whatever you want, and it will produce a much better result than, your first attempt. So that's one thing to mention. But otherwise, yeah, you're right. We're not overly worried at the moment because, yeah, people don't understand how to prompt it properly, and as a result, it produces a lot of really bland beige content that just doesn't live up to the standards of what we can do for our clients. So that's all good at the moment, but things are improving. Um, and in terms of AI for good, then that is more just personal interest and fascination. Like I'm really interested in learning all about the good applications of AI. I'm not interested in how it can create images about of a cat having a shower or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I'm interested in about big data and how it is being used to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. And there are some fascinating things happening all around the world by some amazing companies like AI using satellite images of agriculture and stuff to support, regenerative farming and
Mhm.
reforestation, things like that. And it's just the ability to process such huge data sets in a fraction of a second is doing stuff that, yeah, humans alone could either never do, or it would take quite literally hundreds of years to do it. So incredible things are happening. I wish I had some more specific examples to chat about right now, but I've seen multiple use cases of AI in regenerative agriculture, in particular, conservation and yeah, rewilding efforts as well. Again,
Mhm.
using sort of satellite data and climate and weather data to build huge, big pictures of things that are helping to act as far more, long-term predictive models and things like that.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Yeah.
Right. Fantastic. Yeah. Yeah. And all these things, it always remains to be seen, doesn't it? Because, when Bitcoin came along and the technologies behind that, everybody was talking about what's the impact of that on sustainability. And I think the answer probably, looking backward, is none or negative. But it'll be interesting to see how far out of those niches you mentioned AI actually expands.
Yeah, it
So
will. Uh,
strikes me that managing a grid with lots of different renewable energy systems feeding into it and batteries connected and things like that is the sort of place where a AI model would could potentially manage things much better than trying to work it out yourself, mechanically, X plus Y equals Z sort of thing. So
my
that's my tip.
Yeah, absolutely. And a big learning from the course that's really stayed with me. Um, this will be important for anyone out there who's like particularly worried about AI and the implications of jobs and the workforce and stuff. Is that AI won't necessarily just replace your job, but people that can do your job that understand AI will replace those who can't.
Yeah.
And that's the top tip. So AI won't replace marketing or fill in your job title there. I think the example they used in the course was like radiologists to
Yeah.
show you that, how broad the spectrum is here. So AI won't replace marketing, but marketers who understand how to use AI will replace those who don't. So that's a good way of looking at it. So I would just recommend anyone who's got an interest in it or is maybe worried about it or concerned about it to follow that up by
Yeah.
doing your own research, learning about it, maybe doing a course like the one I did. But there are loads out there now, and I'm sure there are a bunch of like quite useful free ones because we're in the age of massive open online courses and stuff. So there's loads you can learn from YouTube and
Yeah.
LinkedIn Learning and other places. So that would be my top tip.
Well, speaking of top tips, because I've kept you for quite a while, but I was just wondering, just to finish, if you could give if say somebody was joining your business wet behind the ears, maybe straight out of university, what would be your top advice you would give them?
If they were joining Avery and Brown.
Yeah.
So yeah, great question, because this wouldn't be a prerequisite to us hiring them, because we'd be hiring for, culture fit and uh, you know, just general intelligence and acumen and all the usual things. But so in their first like couple of months, we'd put them on their carbon literacy training to get them up to speed with the sustainability and climate change narrative. And because that's what we want all our staff to be, so that we know that they can do the best possible job for our clients in terms of helping them to communicate their message accurately and authentically and avoiding greenwash. And the great thing about carbon literacy training is, thousands of people have done it outside of a business context, just as individuals, because they're interested in climate change and what's happening in the world, and they want to understand it at a deeper level. So that would be my top tip, is to do your carbon literacy training.
So to get the technical knowledge you need in order to do the marketing, I suppose it comes back to what we were talking about before about authenticity and being purpose driven. You have to know what the purpose means first, don't you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Brilliant. Well, thanks very much, Russ, for your time. We've covered a huge amount of ground, from greenwash to AI, and a lot of points in between. So thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me, Gareth. Really enjoyed it.